Hey guys, it's Miss Marnon. So I'm sure you've heard before giving 110%. So today we're going to actually talk about what it means to be a percent that is bigger than 100. So first we're going to look at this review question. So it wants us to shade in 0.54 of the grid blue and 13% of the grid green. And it wants to know what percent is shaded. And then for the second one, shade 7% of the grid green and shade 0.54 of the grid red and shade 1/4 of the grid blue. So this might sound difficult. If you need a hint, one thing I would do is I would change this 0.54 into a percent by moving that decimal over. And it's the same as 54%. And I will tell you that those grids do have 100 squares each. So pause the video and see if you can color these grids accordingly. Okay, so if I want to shade 0.54 or 54% of the grid blue, I'm going to get my blue out. I'll probably make it a little bit thicker so it's easier. So we can change the thickness of our pens. So if I want 54% blue and there's 100 here, that means I need 50 and 4 more. So these are in rows of 10. So there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 54% blue. Now we need 13% green. So here we have there's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So there's our 13% green. What percent is shaded? So the easiest way for us to figure that out is to count how many squares are shaded. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 7. So we have 67% shaded. For this next one, we're going to shade 7% green. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 green. And then 54%, because it's the 0.54 again, red. So I'm going to first do, here's 10, 20, 30, 40, there's 50, 53, 54. And then 1/4 of it blue. 1/4 as a percent is 25%. So I need to color 25 of these. So there's 9, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. And this way actually might be easier to count the ones I haven't shaded first. So I can see here that I didn't shade 10, 14. So if I didn't shade 14%, then we can do 100 minus 14. We shaded 86%. So that's our review question, and it kind of just reviews what does it mean to be a percent and seeing that we can go between these different representations of percent, decimal, and fraction. So here's our preview question. If each 10 by 10 grid represents one whole, what percent is represented by the shaded region? So pause the video and see if you can figure out what percent this is. Okay, so this is one whole. This is 100% on this grid. Then we have 10, 20, 5 more. So this is another 25%. Together, this is actually 125%. So it's more than one whole, and it's 25% more than one whole. So our notes today, we're just going to be doing the same problems we have been doing, but now we're going to be able to have percents that are bigger than 100. So this first one's going to be, actually all three of them might be pretty easy for you now. We should be getting to be percent experts. So Austin scored 9 out of 8 points on his last independent practice quiz on Canvas. What is his percent grade? So this happens a lot because that first question is always extra credit. So a lot of you guys keep getting more than 100% on these independent practices. So if it's 9 out of 8, we can write that as the fraction 9/8. If you're lucky enough to have one of those TI-34s at home, you can just type in this fraction hit the second button and then the enter button, or the percent button, and then enter. So second percent enter would do that. If you don't have one of those calculators, let's do this on the Desmos Calculator. So again, we should all have the Desmos Calculator bookmarked on our computer by now. So we have the fraction 9/8, and they tell us that that is 1.125 as a decimal. So let's be clear, this is it as a decimal, not as a percent. To go from the decimal to percent, we know we want a bigger number. So we're going to move this decimal place over to the right. So this is actually going to be, he got a 112% on that quiz. Well, 112.5, let's not get rid of that 0.5. So 112.5%. So we know this is right because we know he did more than a 100% on the quiz, right? He got 9 out of 8. If you did not remember to move this decimal, or you didn't remember which way, think about which way would make sense. Did he get a very small amount of the quiz right, or did he get even more than the whole quiz right? Let's look at number 2. Jayla wants to increase her STAR score by 15%. If on the fall STAR test she scored 760 points, what is her goal for the next STAR test? Now we're going to have a page and a whole lesson on percent increases coming up, but we can kind of figure this out right now. We could figure out 15% of 760 and add it, but if what she has now is 100%, and maybe let's look at this on a double number line off to the side here. So let's have this be her points, and this be her, oh, that's messy, and this be her percent. So when she got 760, that was the whole that we're basing this off of. This is our 100%. If she wants to go up 15%, she wants to go up to 115%, and we need to figure out how many points that is. So instead of using 15% and multiplying, we can actually use this 115%. We actually want 115% of 760. So what we've been doing is we've been just multiplying the 760 times our percent. Now, if we're lucky enough to have a TI-34, we can type this in just as we see it, 760 times 115%. Or if we don't have that calculator, we need to change this percent to a decimal. And we're going to change it to a decimal by moving that place over twice to the left. So really what we're going to end up writing is 760 times 1.15. So we can do 760 times 1.15. I can do that right on this calculator. Times 1.15, that's to represent our 115%. And I got 874. If you remember on the Desmos calculator, if you're using this, the other way we could have done this is you could have said 115% of 760, and we still would have gotten 874 points. So that is Jayla's next goal. For exercise 3, we're going to have to do a couple of different parts here, but that's okay because they're each kind of easy. We'll go through them pretty quickly. So let's change colors here. Let's do orange. There are 750 students in the 7th grade class and 625 students in the 8th grade class at Lincoln Middle School. We want what percent of the 7th grade class is the 8th grade class. So we want compared to the 7th. So compared to, this is going to be our whole. And the 8th grade is really going to be like our part or our quantity. So we usually do everything compared to the whole. That's usually what we do it out of. We're doing it out of the 7th grade class. So how much is the 8th grade out of the 7th grade class? So the 7th grade class is going to be our denominator here. So we have 750. And then for our 8th grade, we have 625. So we can convert this fraction to a decimal right on our TI-34 by typing this fraction in, hitting second percent enter, or we can type it on any other calculator. We can type it in 625 over 750, and it's going to give us this decimal 0.83 repeating. Let's write that down. That's 0.83 repeating. We need to move that decimal place over 2 places to the right to be a percent. So now we're going to actually have 83. And because this 3 keeps repeating, it's like there's another 3 here, right? This is actually going to be 83.3 repeating percent. So what percent of the 7th grade class is the 8th grade class? 83.3 repeating percent. The next one is the opposite. They want what percent of the 8th grade class is the 7th grade class. So compared to the 8th grade class, out of the 8th grade class, how big is the 7th grade class? So we're actually going to flip this fraction over so that we have 750 out of 625. So let's go and type that on our calculator. So we're going to have the fraction 750 over 625, and we get this nice number that doesn't have anything repeating, 1.2. So it's not 1.2%. We still need to move that decimal over 2 places. And now we need to consider what happens when I move it over and there's nothing there. It's just a 0. So this is going to be 120%. Now we need to make sure this makes sense. Can we have 120%? Well, is the 7th grade class bigger than the whole 8th grade class? Yes, it is. So since the 7th grade class is bigger than the whole 8th grade class, we're going to have a percent that's bigger than 100. So here's our part C where we're going to be able to write a CER. So Principal White will need to increase the number of 8th grade teachers next year if 7th grade enrollment is more than 110% of the current 8th grade enrollment. Will Principal White need to increase the number of teachers? Explain your reasoning. So if we look, the 8th grade class is 120% of the 7th grade class. That is more than that 110% mark off that Principal White has. So what does that mean? That means Principal White needs more teachers. That is our claim. So now we need to state our evidence. That is, in my work, I calculated. So we don't need to write all the calculations out. We don't have to say I divided this by this and I moved the decimal. We just need to say what you did. I calculated the 7th grade class to be 120% of the 8th grade class. So why does that matter? Since that's more than 110%, Principal White needs more teachers. There, we just wrote a CER, and it wasn't too bad. It was about this nice, easy percent problem, just writing that fraction out, converting it. We first had to do a decimal and then percent. If you did have a TI-34, you can just go right from the fraction to the percent. It's a nice little trick. I highly recommend getting a TI-34 calculator. So now all you have left is the practice. So there's 3 questions, and they're going to be very similar to this, although you don't have another CER right here. But we do have this exit ticket. So what does it mean to have a percent greater than 100? So I just want to see what you think, how you would describe what it means to be a percent that's greater or bigger or larger than 100. When you are done with this assignment, you can go in and do the independent practice that is in Canvas.